Today, I wanted to talk about the escalation calculation form 35EC. And I'm not going to go over the whole form itself, but rather just the calculations, because I feel like there's a lot of hesitation to use this form when it actually is very helpful when it comes to calculating. We no longer have to be the ones to figure out what these numbers are. We no longer have to argue about what our math is, and we no longer have to reach back to high school when the last time we used math was. Now, looking at the form originally, this is the form that gets signed around when you send over the contract. It's really intimidating and scary to look at. Please ensure your buyers and your sellers that this is done in an automatic calculation, but the explanation of how it is calculated does need to be spelled out. So that's why this form looks like it does. We are not going to be the ones to do all these mathematical formulas on the bottom, so we can just reassure our clients that these are all done automatically. So how do we calculate these once we get an escalated offer that we want to use to bump up another offer? The first thing I would do is not necessarily reach for the calculation form itself, but you'll want to click Financial Tools. And when you get to the Financial Tools, you're going to see an option that says Form 35E Calculator. This is a place for you to input those numbers just to see what they would come out at before you have to go ahead and fill out the form from the Northwest MLS itself. Now, the EC form is also in the Express Forms category. So if you want to scroll down to 35EC, you'll be able to see the calculation form that you're going to use. That's also the form that you're going to bring into your transaction desk signing as well. Now, when you fill out that form, make sure you're doing it within your transaction desk before you bring it to AuthentiSign to have those calculations automatically done for you. So when you pull up on the financial tools with the Northwest MLS, it's going to bring a calculator out to you. Now, it's spelled out pretty well what goes in each one, but it can still seem a little bit confusing. So I'm going to go over how to actually input these numbers into the calculator. The calculator that you're going to use with financial tools is the exact same thing as the 35. So instead of bringing up the 35E, I'm using the financial tools calculator to show which offer would win and what price. So for the example that I wanted to start with, we have two offers. Offer number one is doing $775 as their initial price. They're escalating 5% or $5,000 over the competing offer with a cap of $900,000. Wouldn't this be great if this was real life? Compensation amount does need to be discussed. So for the purpose of this class, I'm throwing in these numbers, but please remember that compensation is a completely negotiable term and there is no standard amount for compensation. The compensation offer from the seller to the buyer's agent in offer one is 2.5%. And the buyer is going to be asking for $5,000 in closing costs. Offer number two is going to start at $800,000, escalating $3,000 over the competing offer with a cap of $900. Now, both of these offers have the same cap. So how do you know which one is the better offer? Compensation amount being offered by offer two is the same as offer one, but the buyer is not asking for closing costs. So how do we input these things to see where they would be? We're going to go to the escalation calculator. Now, the first part of the escalation calculator is going to be for the offer you are using to bump up the other offer. And the offer at the bottom is going to be the offer that you want to accept. So there may be other considering factors when you're looking at offers, such as terms, closing dates, how they're going to pay. Just remember that these are calculators only to figure out what that final price should be. So for the purpose of this, we're going to look back at offer one. Now, offer one was willing to escalate up to $900,000 with increments of $5,000 above the competing offer. When you fill out the escalation calculator, you're going to be referencing line 11, which is the escalation amount, and you're going to be referencing their top dollar as their maximum price in line 13. So I wanted to pull up the escalation form because it is going to be something we directly have to reference when we're filling this out. So how do we fill out offer number one? Our starting price doesn't really matter because both of these are going to escalate over that starting price to a capped amount. So the first thing that this calculator wants to know is what the top dollar is going to be for offer number one. In our case, it's 900. So 900 goes in section A when it says the maximum price of the competing offer is the offer using to escalate the other offer. Now, the competing offer's price also has to take into consideration any buyer credits or seller credits that are in the offer. This can be $5,000 in closing costs that a buyer is asking for. Any compensation that is offered to the buyer's agent also has to be written. This can be written in dollar amounts or percentages, but either way, it needs to be accounted for in either the dollar section or the percentage. At the end, you're going to have what the competing offer's net price is at their top escalation. Now we're going to look at offer number 2. So offer number 2 is going to go in the bottom of this. This is going to be the offer that we want to accept. For some reason, maybe your seller has a choice or has a decision on how they want to accept this. But for calculation purposes, we're going to put offer number 2 in this place. When we reference offer number 2, I'm sorry I didn't put the numbers in here. I'll go straight to the next slide. Offer number 2 is starting at $800,000. They're escalating $3,000 over the next highest offer, and their cap is $900,000. They are asking for a buyer compensation of the same amount as the competing offer at 2.5, but they are not asking for buyer closing costs. We would put the amount that's being escalated over the competing offer in section G. When you put that in section G, it calculates automatically in that gray area what the escalated price over the competing offer would be. Then you're going to need to still go in and mark any buyer concessions or seller concessions that are in the contract. In our case, the buyer's not asking for closing costs, but there is compensation in this contract being asked for the buyer's agent. That compensation amount has to go in section J because it is being offered in a percentage and we have to account for it. Now, once all that is done, the next gray box right there is going to be the escalated price using that formula. But we can't figure out the final price until we know what each person's top dollar is. In no situation whatsoever will an offer exceed that top dollar, that capped number. Once we have that number, we go ahead and put that number in the maximum purchase price. This is going to be referencing line 13 for our escalation addendum. Once that's done, an automatic calculation of the offers is made. What this calculator does, and it's actually a really great thing to have a conversation with your seller about. It not only tells them what the offer price should be at the end of all these calculations, keeping everything back into consideration, but it also tells your seller what their net is going to be with each offer. Like I said, you might find an offer where there are more concessions and the seller nets less money by accepting the offer that goes higher in purchase price. So it won't always work out to where the higher offer wins the deal. Then automatically calculated is going to be the new purchase price. That new purchase price is going to be your contract price. The net price is going to be a conversation piece that you can have with your seller so the seller understands where all of the pluses and minuses are going and what they're going to be left with at the end if accepting this offer. So let's look at another example that might be a little bit more realistic. Maybe something that we have a little bit more clarity on who really is the higher offer and who is not. So here's a situation. Offer number 1 is starting at $500. Their escalated amount is going to be $2,500 over the next competing offer with a cap of $550. Compensation being asked for is 2.5%. Offer number 2 is starting their offer at $515, escalating $2,500 over the next competing offer with a cap of $575, but they're asking for more compensation than the competing offer by putting down 3. So who wins the offer? What is the final purchase price going to be? Before this form was invented, we had to do this by ourselves and just calculate these numbers. But with so many terms now being negotiable, especially the addition of the negotiable buyer compensation, we have to take everything into consideration. In putting these two into this calculator, I have your first one maxing out at $550 with 2.5%, with the competing offer net price being $536,250. The escalated amount for the competing offer is $2,500 over the next highest offer. Their base is going to start $2,500 over what that lower offer is offering. Now, there are no credits to buyer, but we are asking for 3% instead of 2% for buyer compensation. So that gets put into the calculator. And then you have your your escalated purchase price for your competing offer at 555 to now the seller is going to net 538 590. So that conversation is something that you have with your seller. But as you can see, even with a slightly higher compensation being asked for, because the purchase price was higher with the escalation, the second offer would have won competing offer with a purchase price pre-calculated for us at 555 to 50. I know this is a lot to take in, and I'm sorry that this is full of numbers. However, these calculators are making our lives much, much easier when it comes to what our final sales price should be. Also, remember when you use the calculator to figure out what that escalated price is, if you've forgotten any of those elements, if you've forgotten any buyer credits, any compensation in there, that buyer has the chance to contest what your numbers are with your calculation. So make sure if you're using the calculator that you are accounting for every single buyer credit and every single seller credit. I appreciate your time. And if you have questions about the escalation addendum and escalation calculation, please reach out and let me know.